Well, hello. Welcome back to Family Friday. I'm George Willett. You're seeing I'm in a little different space today. I'm actually recording myself, so I thought I'd be back here in Mission Command where Scott normally is. Hey, I'm glad you're coming back. We are in the middle of, towards the end of, I'm not sure yet. We're doing this discussion about the dominant worldview of American adults. It comes from this book right here. This is the book by George Barna that I have been talking about. It's the research that he did out of Arizona Christian University, the Cultural Research Center. You can go online and buy this. Again, you will see it's a pretty thin book, but it's a quick read, but it's interesting. And I'm fascinated because I think it tells us a lot about the culture that we're living in today. And the church needs to be aware of that so we can know the best possible way for us to share the gospel news. As always, let's start off here with this dominant worldview of adults in America. They did this questionnaire that they sent out to a bunch of people, adults 18 and older, and they found out that secular humanism, 2%, moralistic therapeutic deism, which we talked about last week, just 1% of the American population holds to that worldview. Postmodernism, 1%, nihilism, 1%, Eastern mysticism, Marxism, less than 0.5% for each of those. Biblical worldview, out of those competing worldviews, was the largest one at 6%. But what they found out going through this research was most American adults have a worldview that's best described as syncretism, syncretic. It's taking a little bit of a bunch of competing thoughts and worldviews and opinions and doing something that is very individual and unique to you, kind of what works best for you. So like I said, we're going through some of these because when they looked through even deeper, they found that even though these people didn't have this as a primary worldview, that they leaned heavily on these views to help them work out their own personal worldview. So 39% of the American adult population leans heavily towards moralistic therapeutic deism. 31% biblical worldview. Secular humanism, 16%, postmodernism, another 16%, another 32% of the population. Nihilism, Eastern mysticism, and Marxism all at 10%. So again, last week we went over moralistic therapeutic deism, and tonight what we want to do is touch on secularism and postmodernism. And I'm doing them together because they do complement each other very well, and I'm also wanting us to get through this and get to some other things that come out of this research. So what's secular humanism? The belief that humanity, that man by himself is capable of morality, of choosing what's right and what's wrong, and of self-fulfillment without ever having a belief in God. That human reason, that secular ethics and philosophy, philosophical naturalism, that nature is all there is, you don't need anything supernatural, are enough to base your life on. And they specifically reject religious dogma, religious teaching, statements that are saying this is the way it is. Any supernaturalism, anything that is not explained by nature, they reject. And all superstitions are rejected as the basis for your morality and decision making. You don't live your life based on the supernatural in this worldview. So postmodernism. Now again, you'll see they kind of complement each other. Postmodernism focuses on the reality of the individual. It's really about your perception, your understanding. It denies statements that say that this is true for all people. It's very much well known what's true for you is true for you, but it may not be for me. So all things are relative. All things depend on the person, their socioeconomic status, their background, their family trauma, their historical trauma. All of this stuff, we're creatures of culture and societal effects. So it's going to make each one of us perceive things differently. And an example of this that I see going on today is the idea that not all people see stealing as a negative or something that's wrong. And they will try to bend over backwards and explain why, in this context, why stealing is actually not a moral evil or a wrong thing to do. You actually see different states, different cities, enacting this kind of worldview in their local politics or local law enforcement, where they have decriminalized theft below a certain financial number. Like if it's not above $1,000, not above $1,500, they're not going to send the police, they're not going to arrest people, they're not going to take them to court and try them. And we've seen the effect of that in places in California, where large groups of people will get together, run in to different stores, and each of them grab handfuls of stuff. Now, any individual person is not going to have more than this amount or do something that's going to get people to arrest them and try them and put them in jail. But as a group, they just are wiping out these stores to the point where there are many stores over there that are closing down in certain areas because they can't keep restocking the stores. It's too much of a financial burden. But there are some people who think that this is okay. And this is why I think this research is so important, because you can actually see the effects on behavior in this country based on these worldviews. So you dig into the book a little bit and you look at some of the research. So what they find is that 54% of people that lean heavily into these worldviews believe that all truth is subjective and there are no moral absolutes. Over half. I mean, that's a pretty big number. And again, think about it. That means that any behavior is up for interpretation as whether it's right or wrong, good or bad. 34% then believe that life has no intrinsic value, that there's no worth just by being human. And if morality is subjective, if it's nothing is absolute, then even as far as the laws that we make around life and death issues are up for grabs. 29% believe that there's no way that you could even know if God exists. So it's really difficult to have these conversations when you start off believing no matter what you tell me, no matter what you show me, no matter what kind of evidence you have, there's just no way that we'll ever be able to ever know. So why am I going to live this way? And 24% believe that historical narratives, history books, the things that we research and look into, that they're unreliable because they all depend on subjective human perspectives. The old saying that the winners write the history books, which is not always accurate. I mean, but the idea that any human that writes a history book is bringing with them their own preconceived notions, their own narratives, so you can't trust anything. And again, we see that in this country where there's been a massive rewriting about the history of this country, of other countries around the world. And I want to be careful here because I do think we need to, as a culture, address past evil that was done by us as a culture. But that doesn't mean that we throw everything out as though there's nothing of value for who we are as a country and how we were founded. We address and we deal with who we are without rejecting everything about where we came from. Now, some other things about this research, because again, you guys were asking for questions. Well, like, what are some of the questions they asked? And these are the kind of the broad, sweeping questions like, did the universe have a natural cause or a supernatural cause? 54% of these people believe the universe had a purely natural cause, that science can explain everything. And there is no need or no evidence that there was a supernatural or other than natural explanation, that the universe wasn't created, it just happened. 48% believe that human beings are purely a result of evolutionary processes, naturalistic process that can be understood and studied. They will reject completely that man was created by God or that we've been created by God in his image. Again, that whole idea that life doesn't have intrinsic value. You see where these are very different than the biblical worldview. 36%, when they're asked to define how you define a successful life, say that success is found in human accomplishments, what we do. anything that would produce happiness or a sense of fulfillment. And again, it's not about glorifying God. It's not about living a life of obedience or holiness. It is what makes you happy, what fulfills you. And this means that it's subjective. Every individual person will find something different that makes them happy. And what if what someone wants that makes them happy or fulfills them is something the rest of us find abhorrent, find evil? The collection of obscene amounts of wealth or power. I mean, I'm thinking of things that people are talking about today. If you really believe this, then it doesn't matter how much wealth or power or control someone gets if that's what makes them happy, if that's what gives them a sense of fulfillment. And then 24, that truth, if there is going to be any type of truth, that it's only found in scientific study, empirical, hard science, and the proof that it finds. Now, that would work really well for anything that science is set up to answer. Science is set up to answer questions about the natural world. But there's so many things about the human experience that are not grounded solely in the physical. They're the laws of logic. They exist before we ever had scientific inquiry. They're self-existing. Things such as beauty. I mean, there seems to be this view of what beauty is, but it's really hard to quantify it. The human consciousness, how science can't really even explain what consciousness is, much less where it is or how it functions. We just know that we're conscious, we're self-aware. This is an interesting one for me because if you believe that truth is only found in science, then truth is always up for grabs because science is always moving forward, always growing, always changing. Things that were scientific evidence a few hundred years ago have now been proven to not be true, and there's something deeper, something more. And when you start thinking about the creation of the universe, science really hasn't said, here's the evidence of how the universe was created. There's some theories, there's some ideas, there's math, but there's really no hard empirical scientific evidence that definitively says this is it. The same with the creation of life. There's ideas, there's evolutionary theories, but more and more evolutionary biologists are saying we have to retweak and retool our science because the evidence we're getting doesn't hold up to the theories we've had. So if you really believe this way, but then you reject that there may be something more that explains the creation of the universe or something more that explains life, it makes it hard to have those conversations. Again, I know this was quick, and I'm wanting these ones to be a little bit quicker, but what I really want you to take away from this is think about what people believe. Think about how people are answering these questions, and look around where you live. People who call themselves Christians, which is the majority of people in the United States, have views, beliefs that are against what the Bible teaches. That's this whole conversation we're having. So we're going to continue. I hope this is helpful. Please make a comment if there's more that you want or something less. And one of the things, just to let you know, is we got a few more lessons on this that we're going to talk about. And then most likely what we're going to do is actually get into a book of the Bible and do a little bit of a Bible study. How do we study the Bible? What are the questions we ask? And work through a book of the Bible verse by verse so that we can have a better understanding of it. I think that'd be a great way to spend our time. Well, again, thanks so much. I appreciate you tuning in. If you like it, if you think it's something that's worthwhile, like our Facebook page, subscribe to YouTube, whichever platform you're on, and share the content. Let other people know that this is out there so they can, kind of pick it up too. But God bless, and we will see you next week. Bye.